All right, so we're going to go over today in this video what I think are the most important tools in Maya for doing 3D art. They're the basic tools. All the other tools, they all do really important things, but these are the basic tools and the basic concepts for doing 3D art. It's kind of, you could kind of look at other tools almost as though they were like macros in a word processing program. Not to demean them, they're fantastic tools, and the programmers took a lot of time to make them. So, so to begin with, we're going to deal with center points. And center points are important in games because you have to know where the object is going to be placed. Typically, center points for characters are right between the feet on the floor. If they weren't, if they were like between the knees, then your character would be walking through the ground. Other things, modular components or objects, your barrel might be going through the ground. So it's important to know where to put your center point. So just making, for an example, we have our cube. You'll see that the center point is right in the middle. In order to change the center point, you have to press Insert. I usually do it on the numeric keypad. And I move it down to the y-axis, y value for this vertex. And you can see where the y is facing upward. In order to do that, I hold down V for vertex snap, and then I just aim it at that vert. And turn off move center point, and there you are. I can also hold down X, snap to grid, put it straight up. Now our cube is right on top of the grid. There's other important things about snapping that I don't know if I've gone over or you might not remember. Um, if you can snap right in with the actual vert. If I go click on the actual vert itself and hold down V, I can go to that individual vert. If you were to use that as a center point, sometimes it's not really a good idea because now the object would rotate right around this vert. If you want to put the center point right back into the middle, you go to Modify, Center Pivot, got it right down in the middle again. But I want it on the bottom. So like I did before, and there is use of center point. All right, duplicating objects. Very handy. You'll find duplicating objects for a number of uses. Mirroring, things like that, doing one side of an object, mirroring it to the other, so you have automatic or very quick symmetry. So we're just going to make a cube. The easiest way to duplicate something is just Control D, and you've got a new object. And this object is its own independent object. If I move verts on this, it doesn't move it on this guy, which leads to this. Now I'm going to take this object, make it a little distinctive, and I'm going to show you what it's like to mirror this object. And I'm going to move the center point out of it. And to mirror it, I go to Edit, Duplicate Special, and you bring up this box. Now, in order to, well, you'll see some stuff here. We have copy, instance, parent is the grouping. We'll talk more about that later. And then we have translate, rotate, scale, and the number of copies. So these guys are here because each copy that is made uses these to add to it. And what I mean by that is, I'll show you in a second. First, we have Z is along this axis, and I want to mirror this. So I'm going to change this to -1 and copy it. So now we have it mirrored. And you'll notice also that it's a copy. They are both completely independent. However, if I go into duplicate special and I choose instance, still have that -1 on the z-axis, duplicate that, I go in, if I select divert here, it's going to do the same thing on the other because it's an instance. You can modify either side and it will change on either side. All right, now say I want to make an array. I want to make an array of the same object going around in a circle. Go to duplicate special, change that back to 1, number of copies 7, and we're going to make it spin around this axis, which is y, not who. So change that to 45, number of copies 7, set to instance, and we have a lovely array. Since it's instance, we can go in here, we can modify each element of it, and make a kaleidoscopy thing. So duplicating objects has a lot of different uses. The other elements of it, if we were to go to duplicate special, say we want to transform. If we want to transform it along the z-axis, over here we might just put 1, and it will continuously make 7 duplicates all along one row. But we don't have anything selected, so we're going to do that. Oop, it went the other direction. So there we have our objects all duplicated. And they're all instances, so they all move like a chorus line. What other things about duplicate that's interesting? We could also change the size as well if we wanted to something, 0.5, and have it get smaller and smaller if it goes along the z-axis. That wasn't exactly what we wanted. We wanted to go translate 1, scale. Oh, there you go. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because now that the object is smaller, the translate is also going to be a little bit smaller. I think that's what the issue was. That's kind of cool. Squishing it. All right, there's duplicate for you. All right, now I also want to go over extracting faces. And extracting faces is also another very important tool. You might need this if you want to work just on one section of an object and it gets to be annoying to work on with another object. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is to extract faces off of an object. And used to be in the old versions, you'd have to have a special little macro, a special mel script that was called detach and separate, but thank goodness they fixed that. So all I need to do is select the faces that I want to extract. And I go to Edit Mesh, and I go down to Extract. And now we get a kind of a wacky handle here. If you just pull on this handle up here, you're going to get a little bit of strange results. Never exactly sure why exactly it does that, but if you flip this little doohickey down, then you're going to be able to move it in a more normal fashion. And there is extracting objects. You also might notice that it's black on the inside, and that's because it's single-faced. These polys are single-faced. If I were to go to shading and select backface culling, you would see they'd be transparent. You can see that they are, in fact, single-faced. So that is extracting polygons. Very, very important. along with extracting the polygons, we're also going to have um, combining objects. And combining objects is a little different from um, is very different from grouping them. If I create an object and I extract the faces on that object, move that up there. We now have two separate objects. But I want to put these objects back together again so that they behave as one. And you'll notice also with these objects extracted, they'll be grouped under the parent object. And you can still select both of them, but they are essentially two separate objects. So I want to put these guys back together again. Doesn't really matter in what way. You could move it over here, whatever. And select both of the objects. Go over to Mesh and Combine. And now we have one single object. You'll also notice that when you duplicate or when you combine the objects, you'll have some oftentimes leftover data in the outliner. You might want to get rid of those. And you'll also have more history in it. Now, one of the important things to do frequently if you're working on an object for games is you'll want to delete the history. And that most likely will get rid of a bunch of this stuff here. So to delete the history, you go into Edit, Delete by Type, and History. And you see it's deleted that and deleted this. If you just delete the stuff over here, you could run into issues. I think I've seen textures disappear for some unknown reason. Don't know exactly why. Anyways, that is combining objects. All right, normals. Normals have to do with essentially the shading and smoothness of surfaces. Hard normals appear faceted, and soft normals appear smooth. So you might see, if I were to create a cylinder, we see this cylinder is very smooth on the sides, and those are smoothed normals or normalized normals. We can change those to be faceted by making those normals hard. So if you go to Harden Edge, you'll see that it is now faceted. And where I got that was if I go to Mesh, Display, and I go to Harden Edge or Soften Edge. It's very good to put those on your shelf, and a reminder of how to do that with your shelf is hold down Shift and Control, go down to where it is that you want, and click on Harden, click on Soften, and now I have both of them there. So if I go back again and show you, I'm going to smooth those out, smooth, and now it's nice and smooth. If I created a sphere, for instance, all of those normals are soft. I'm going to make them hard, and there you are. It's very faceted. This can also be important if you're doing a face and you want part of it to be smooth. If you have extruded something out and you want a hard edge, say at the end of a gun or something like that, you don't want that end of that gun to be severely rounded unless that's your design. You would make those normals hard. So these normals out here are hard. And normals are stored. If you imagine what a normal is, it can. Flipping triangle edge is seemingly small thing to do and to talk about, but it actually is pretty important. So if I have a cube and I select one vertex, I move that vertex in, you'll see these polys, these faces, are what you call non-planar or non-coplanar faces because they're quads and there is a invisible edge that's going between them. It used to cause a lot of issues in old engines, and they look pretty strange. So we want to see what those edges are, and in order to see what those edges are, we actually go triangulate them. We go to Mesh, go to Triangulate, and now we have those edges that were once missing. And you'll notice where that contour is, just like that. If I take these and I flip each one, going to, let's see, Mesh Display, flip Triangle Edge, I get a totally different object, all because I flipped those edges. A lot of times edges can be good to have there to triangulate an object. If you have something that is an unusual quad, a lot of times it's good to have those edges on there and to triangulate that object or that face. And that is flipping edges. You should probably also put those on your shelf. Those are very handy to have. You should also know which menu they're in. So if I go there, I can flip them back. Each one is a little different. All right, flipping faces is essentially kind of like flipping normals, essentially. But besides that, let's just make a cube. I've gone over this in a couple other ones. If I go over here and I select these two faces and I go into Mesh Display, select Reverse, those two faces have been flipped. Now they look black, but the reasoning for that is that I need to change back face culling. And now you see that I have two faces in there. It can be very useful, especially if, say, you're making a little room or something like that, and you want to have all of your stuff displayed in there. You have your cube, but your faces are going the other direction. You can select those guys and select Reverse, and now you have them facing you. Very handy. All right, extruding faces, extruding and cutting faces. Very important basic tool. Two different things, but I think that they're good to put together. So much of making an object in games is extruding faces. You can make just the most complex things out of extruding faces. I once saw a guy over at Ronin Entertainment, where I worked for a while, making, what did I make? Bruce Lee, Quest of the Dragon, or Enter the Dragon. Anyway, so I saw this guy make a character just out of extruding faces, and it wasn't a bad looking character too, and he did it in 10 minutes. It was insane. So basically, just select your face, press Control E, you'll get these handles, and you can change the size of your handles, by the way, by the plus or minus sign. And I press Control E, I'm going to move that on up. So now I have these four new faces. And I can do other things like I could make a column out of it. I could scale, extrude once more, bring that on up there. And now I have a column, all from extruding. Super easy, super fast. All right, so now comes cutting, and there's a bunch of different ways of cutting. You can use Booleans, you can do whatever. What's really lovely about the newer versions of Maya is the multi-cut tool, whereas there used to be multiple tools. The cut tool was a lot simpler and it had a slice tool. So multi-cut is great. I always use it through the pop-up menu and holding down Shift and right mouse button, and I get multi-cut. So I can cut anywhere I want. There's special key commands that you can use. Shift will will do a snap. I think that you can adjust it. If this is in half, 50, you can probably also put it in quarters. But I can cut right over there. I can cut to another edge. I can even cut, and you couldn't do this in earlier versions, inside of the polygon itself and create some wacky cuts. Very, very useful. Now I can also cut along an edge loop. If I hold down Control, I can cut along this edge loop. If I go to another edge, it will notice that I want to do a vertical. So extremely useful. That's very useful if you're doing faces or whatever. Edge loop tools are quite handy. So let's see. So we have that fancy new face. We could extrude it out. Now we have something rather unusual. And we begin to triangulate that because it's an unusual face. So yeah, cutting is really, really important. You're going to use it a whole lot. All right, extruding along a curve. Very handy if you want to make something tube-like. There's other tools like revolving and lathing. Lathing, you can just generally do that as extrusions. But extruding along a curve I've used quite a lot, and basically it just involves using a curve tool. You can use any of these guys. The CV curve tool is the easiest one. Putting down, you have to do at least 4 in order to get some kind of a curve going, and lock that down by pressing Enter. And then you use the shape that you're going to extrude. You can do other CV curve tools, or in this case, we're just going to make it a tube. So we're just going to create a NURBS circle. The only time I ever really use NURBS. And we'll rotate that. And we'll make it perpendicular. Size it down a little bit. All right. So then the order with which you select the object is also important. If you select the curve before this and extrude this along the curve, it's going to look like a big, huge funnel. And you can't have funnel without fun. But you want to have the circle selected first, the extrusion object, and then the path that it goes along. So you start with that, and then you go to surface and extrude. And in general, these are probably the settings you'll want to have at path, component, polygons especially. Quads, you'll want, no need to create extra triangles if you don't need them. And count is really is your go-to essentially, and you can and there you are. Now the count, if you increase the count, you're just going to get higher tessellation. You'll notice that you just have a hexagonal shape going along here. If you want 7 sides so that you can cut it down the middle, you might have to fiddle a bit with the numbers. So for instance, if we went into Surface and we selected Extrude Options, and we increased that to like 500, you'll get the shape that you can cut down the middle. However, you're going to have a lot more going on over here. So then you just have to, like I said, fiddle around with the numbers a little bit. Go into the options. You can select general, you'll get a lot more here. UVs, the U in that case is typically like the object that you'll see at the end. You're going to want to cut it down the middle. And then this one will be the V going along vertical. And we'll probably just put in like 12 over there, extrude, and then we have a much simpler object that you can cut. What's interesting is you can also move the curve once you've put it in there, once you've extruded it, and you can make it move around like a snake. You can also you noticed I just went into vertex mode when I edited that curve. It has no actual volume to it, the curve itself. So, but it's used as a tool in order to create the tube. You'll also notice that the tube is black on the outside, and that is because our normals are facing inward. And of course, to do that, we just flip our normals, and you have to remember where flipping them is, reverse. And now our normals are facing outward, and that's your tube. Okay, another really now this is a fun tool, and you might call me easily amused, but it's kind of neat. Ignore the sounds in the background. My two dachshunds are wrestling. So let's see. If I take a sphere, let's just make it a little bit less complicated, and then I create a cube. It's in there, Prego. And now I'm going to make it a little bit more narrow. And remember, that's a very handy thing to have to do, is if you click on one of the squares outside of the normal handles, you can do 2 axes at a time. So here is a cube inside of a circle. It's a glorious thing to behold. But what we're going to do is even more glorious, and we're going to show Booleans. So, and again, like extruding along a curve, it's important which one you select first. So we select the sphere first, and the modifying object second, Booleans, and union. Now, it doesn't look like a whole lot happened, but if I go into wireframe, you'll see that the inside of this cube has been taken away and kind of merged with the volume. But most importantly is that the faces right where the union has occurred have been tessellated and cut. So if I were to go in here and triangulate that, you'd see a bunch of edges in there. We can also change the kind of operation of the Boolean, and you can do that typically when you first make the Boolean. There will be that little window over there, and you can change it. But you can also change it afterwards if you go into the history. And I'm going to change it to difference. Difference is we'll cut that object right out of the first object, and that creates a space inside of it. Quite useful. Or we can choose intersection, and that is the object that was cut out of the sphere. So a little home fry. So there, that's Booleans. Very useful. Like I said, if you go into these polygons over here, select them and select triangulate, you can see that it's cut those out. Very handy to put stuff together. And Booleans are often, they can crash Maya. They used to crash it a lot more. So if you're done with your Boolean operation, it's typically good to delete your history, delete by type and history, and those are gone. nice clean object over there. And there you are. All right, so the last one I'm going to describe here is smoothing, another very vital tool. Say you have the handle of a gun, and you can do this with so much. You can start with something very basic like our wonderful cube, and you want to turn this into the handle of a gun, a very basic handle of a gun. And so we just lengthen that out. We can extrude this up and pull it back over here. Extrude this out over here. Now you have your basic shape for the handle of that gun. Just super simple. So now when you have that, you go over to Mesh and you select Smooth, and you don't have to do that actually. You can just go straight into Smooth. They have tools right there immediately. And you have divisions. Now I can choose a lot of different divisions. You can make it look super crazy. Highly tessellated. I don't recommend that because the more vertices you have, the harder it is to modify and to change the shape. You could create a lattice around it and then deform that if you wanted, but that often takes a lot of time. So you can also, like, I could just smooth it with one, and I have some nice beveled edges like that, and accept that. I could fix these guys, bring that up over there. Now say you wanted to have like some little cuts along over here for your hands to look like a grip. I might want to select those verts, bring it up just a little bit, change things around. What I can do is I can smooth just certain faces. So I can select those guys, I can go back into smooth, and it will tessellate those faces for you, and you can play around with it. This'll, that's also a little bit too much to deal with. So you can do that, or you could use the wonderful slice tool that we have, the multi-cut tool. Go in there, and you can select on an edge loop. You can cut those guys out, and you can pull these guys out. Make sure you're not selecting other things. Notice also what I did there. I took away a selection. I selected. I can add. I can take away one. I think if you just hold down Shift also, it will invert the selection that you have. That can become quite an annoyance, but it's still there. So I can pull this out, and we have now I have little handles to signify where your fingers go. Smooth is also very handy if you're doing something with a face and you want to have more vertices to move around. You can smooth certain faces and get a little bit more tessellation there that you can move around. So that's smoothing in a nutshell, and an extremely handy tool. And that's it for now. We'll have more coming up soon, is some UV editing, and there's so many things you can do with that. It's really half of what Maya is for 3D art. Thanks for watching.